brief test, and this is to see how your memory works during a period of learning. I'm going to read...
Welcome to the VO2 Lounge podcast. My favourite 2 exercises for maximising glute growth. So currently I'm in my off season. The cycling season's ended, and typically what I do in this period of time is I come back into the gym more frequently, maybe 2-3 times a week at times. And this year in particular, I identified that I felt like some improved muscle mass on the glutes would be beneficial. Now, this isn't from some kind of aesthetic point of view or noticing something. It's purely because historically, the closest I've been towards directly targeting the glutes is through deadlifts and very, very loosely squats. But as we'll discuss later, my squats used to not be to a level of depth that would be promoting some glute hypertrophy. And so this off season, I'm introducing 2 exercises as well as improved range of motion and depth in the squat when I'm doing hack squats to kind of almost get an initial bit of volume into the glutes. But let's start with my true favorite exercise for glute growth, and that's just simply volume. These exercises that I'm about to go over, in reality, the way I've come to this conclusion was that I did one of them on their own. I didn't notice necessarily any delayed onset muscle soreness or any discomfort the day after. I then introduced a second one, suddenly noticed the activation, the DOMs that came the day after, and then tried one of them on their own, the one that's going to be my favorite, and noticed that just increasing the number of sets from, say, 2 sets of, in this case, 20 to 4 sets, elicited the same level of, shall we say, discomfort or activation the next day. So what are these 2 movements? Well, the first one is one that people, I think, neglect. People don't really like, whether because it's awkward, it's a bit too much coordination, or whether because it can be quite hard. And that is the dumbbell lunges. Now, this can be done with barbells, but I think initially doing them with dumbbells, one, the barbell is useful for when you're trying to add more weight, but also when you're just getting into it and the coordination isn't there and the level of safety kind of thing. Dumbbells, you're about to topple over, you just drop them. Whereas a barbell, you're about to topple over. It's a pretty awkward thing to try get off you without just collapsing with it. If your grip strength starts to fail you, which obviously here, there's a side benefit. You're getting it's almost like doing farmer's carries, but on a much lighter scale in theory. You can get a little bit of stimulus there, and then if your grip strength starts to fail you, you can just use wrist straps if the balance is still kind of not there, and you've still got lots of room to move with the dumbbells at your gym. But why the lunge? Well, if you think about the lunging movement in general, what in this current phase of literature is one of the key components to muscle hypertrophy. One of them is, of course, volume, but to some extent, almost more important than that, well, I suppose it can't be more important because if you're not doing any volume, but to be devil's advocate, more important than that is the level of stretch that the muscle undergoes during the movement. So, for example, a dumbbell bench press could be seen as more hypertrophic than a barbell bench press because of the increased range of motion that is possible at the bottom of the lift, at the point at which the pectoral is the most stretched. And this seems to promote the most muscle growth. I forget the exact numbers, but there was a study that in essence had 3 groups: a group that did the full range of motion, a group that did the top 40, excluded the bottom 40% of the lift or 35% of the lift, and a group that only did the bottom 35% of the lift. And they found that the group that did the reduced range of motion, but in the top portion of the lift, showed reduced muscle hypertrophy compared to the group that did full range of motion. But then the group that did just the bottom of the lift actually matched the same, the group that did the full range of motion. Now that's one study, but it gives you the insight into where clearly a lot of this growth and promotion of hypertrophy is coming from. So if we then pick movements that have got more stretch on the target muscle than another, then you would think that you're going to increase the amount of muscle mass. So rather than doing deadlifts, where, usually the volume from a number of reps and sets perspective is probably quite small. Maybe you're doing 3 to 5 reps. In the squat, you could be getting 10 on each leg, so a set of 20. I think 15 to 20 is a good kind of number to target. It's a really easy exercise to set up. You just go grab some dumbbells. If there's no kind of runway or like sled pushing area, then you can just go in the general free weights area and try to get a space that's big enough. There's always kind of a corner of the gym where you can get around it, especially if you're going at a less popular time of day, say, for example, first thing in the morning, or you've got a less overcrowded kind of gym compared to like the commercial set point. But the lunge has got so much activation at that point, especially if you're putting a lot of weight on the leg that is essentially supporting you. Say you're stepping out forwards with your right leg and you're going down. That leg is the one that's getting that glute activation, and then your other leg, so in this case the left hand leg, should just really be there to kind of support you. It's just there to get you through the movement, and obviously it becomes harder as you fatigue, but generally that's what you're trying to do. But personally, I found this movement in particular was key to starting the sort of hypertrophy of the glutes in general. Now, the second exercise I'm going to add to this list, these top two, my two favorites, is going to be the hip thrust. Everyone's favorite glute Instagram movement with a little bit of a twist. Really need to pull in the kind of vanity lifting of like lifting a really heavy weight, not holding the top of the movement for very long, and not doing enough reps. This is a kind of movement we're talking 10 to 15 reps, and at the top of that lift, we're looking to hold it for at least a second. It's not a thrust up, down. It's a thrust through, hold, then bring it down. And ignore the weight from a perspective of, obviously you're going to progress and you're going to see the weight going up. But if you're currently, let's say, doing 100 kilo hip thrusts, you do 3 of them, and then it's like almost an all body effort and you're fatigued and you can't do any more, bring the weight down, come down to like 70 and move through that movement better, hold the top of the movement, and also in that hole as well at the bottom, in a quite well stretched position. Ensure that you control that out of the hole. You're not swinging. You come to a dead stop essentially at the bottom, a bit like a poor form squat where you're coming down and popping out. You want to make sure that you're coming down, holding it in that position, and then beginning the movement again up to that squeezed point and really holding that squeezed part of the lift. And I think these two in conjunction, for me personally, I find to be very effective, and they have been for at least now several months for me. The combination, I find, elicits the best, shall we say, inferred hypertrophy from the level of DOMs the next day, for example. One of them on their own, the hip thrusts, I personally find that on their own seem to be less effective, even when matched for volume, whereas when sort of joined with lunges, I find that this combination seems to see the best results for me. And I'll add a little bonus third element to this, and that is what I mentioned earlier, and that is the squat. when you're doing your squats, if you go to a full range of motion all the way into that bottom of that lift, you can be a very quick pause, but just a pause at the bottom, you're fully extended in there. In that part of the lift, the glutes are actually getting some stimulus. I know people will say that the squat isn't a glute exercise, and I would agree in the sense that it's not in a traditional shoulder width apart leg position squat. That no, this is clearly overloading the quads. However, it can almost act as a little secondary source of volume, a little secondary source of stimulus because if you do your squats to a partial depth, one, you're already robbing yourself of quad activation, but it's almost free glute activation added on top. And so you're doing 6 sets of glute work, like 3 lunges, 3 hip thrusts, or 4 lunges and 2 hip thrusts over the course of a week. And then if you're doing these squats to an adequate depth, you're also tagging on this other potentially 3, 4, 5 sets that are still engaging, targeting, and causing hypertrophy in the glutes, essentially. So it's volume for free. You're already doing the work, may as well do it properly. So these short episodes that I intend to start releasing on Fridays are intended to be an off-the-dome, off-the-cuff episode where I essentially just shed a little bit of information in a shorter form format that I've currently got on my mind. The glute stuff has been on my mind for maybe I've been doing it for at least 3 months at this point. However, it's only recently fully filled into my workouts. I started off trying to figure out some movements, aka the hip thrusts, discovered the lunges, discovered the power of combining them, played around with volume on them, and did a little bit of research into the squat and how much glute activation we can see there. And then it's summated into what isn't necessarily a full 1 hour, 45 minute kind of episode, but it's still something I think is worth sharing and probably engaging some people in a shorter form. What's your takeaway from all this then? Feel free to share your opinions with me on Instagram, email, or on the VO2 Lounge Discord server. The links will all be down below. For more content like this, explore my previous works, follow the show and leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. And lastly, I would like to challenge you to share the pod with one friend today. It really helps the pod grow. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, it's goodbye.